Hello everyone, welcome to the very first episode of Film Quest, and today we're going to talk about the 5 things I loved and the 5 things I didn't love about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to try to do this without as many spoilers, so I'm going to put a mild spoiler warning in case we get into a little bit, but I'm going to do my best not to have any spoilers. I want to start off by saying I loved this movie. Loved it. Like when I left the theater, I thought this is probably one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. Going back to like Maverick from last year, seeing that again, another Tom Cruise movie. It's interesting to me that the film industry right now is struggling to get a movie that really brings people together. And then Tom Cruise is out there just making awesome movies. So I just wanted to say that first, that I really like this movie. And to be honest, I'm going to structure these videos always with 5 things I like, 5 things I didn't. And I really struggled to find 5 things that I didn't. So these are going to be pretty nitpicky. But let's start with the 5 things that I didn't like. Here we go. Number 1, the yellow car scene. So if you've seen the movie, there's a yellow car scene that they basically are running away from the bad guys. That's pretty much the whole story point at this point. And it was fine. It was, there's some funny parts. There's some cool parts, some cool action. There's a couple of cool little moments. But it just was kind of like, okay, this is like going on way too long. I probably could have put it in half, really. So it was a fine part of the movie, but it was the only part probably where I really was just kind of like, okay, let's move along. Let's keep going. But it was fine. It was a fine part. There's actually, this is the only part of the movie too, where there's one particular part where the editing was like super weird, where they're basically like, there's this whole section where you basically think it's over and that they're like not being chased and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, like it just jumps right into like intense action again. So to me, that was a little jarring. That was the only part of the movie where there was actually kind of a jarring part that I was like, oh, that was a weird edit. So the yellow car scene, not my favorite, but ultimately not that big of a deal. Number 2 of the things I didn't like, it's a titch hard to follow at the beginning. I think this is a standard thing for most of the Mission Impossible movies, where the beginning you're just really disoriented because they don't necessarily all tie together story-wise. They have some things tied together character-wise, but like each individual story doesn't necessarily tie together. Some of them have been the later movies, but they're mostly all separate missions. So in the beginning of this one, it does kind of a cold open, which is a little bit different than what they've done before. But it was just a titch hard to follow at the beginning. Like it took me a while to be like, okay, this is where we're at. This is what's going on. Okay, now we're into the movie. So a little bit hard to follow at the beginning. Number 3, there's certain parts that are a little drawn out. Again, this is what I said about the yellow car scene from the first one. There's just a few parts where it was just really like, okay, like we get the point. Like there's the big climactic ending scene at the end where they're on the train, and that whole thing, like basically by the end of it, I was like, okay, this does not need to be this long. We get the point. You could have moved past this way sooner. Mostly, and this is a huge nitpick, but just a couple of parts where I thought this has gone on long enough, so let's move it along. Number 4, the train scene. So I kind of mentioned this in the last one, but there's a couple more points in this. The train scene, pretty much from beginning to end, is fairly laborious. There's a lot of stuff in there that's good, and there's a lot of really great moments, but it could have been shrunk down. So there's just like from basically the beginning to the end of that, all the leading up to all the big moments, like they really milked the time, like how long it took. So really there's just a lot of parts that were pretty long that didn't need to be as long. And the train scene was definitely the longest one where I just thought, okay, I'm kind of over this. Let's move it along a little bit. Number 5, the franchise connections to previous movies are like a pretty drawn out in that, like I should have probably watched some of the other movies, but it was kind of hard for me to remember kind of where everything connected to. So the connections were pretty far apart from the original movie. So that was mostly that's not really a fault of their own. That's mostly a fault of mine, not having rewatched some of the earlier movies. In this particular case, the very first few movies. And that was kind of a big one for me, where it's kind of like, oh wait, where's this guy from? You know where he's from because they show enough scenes to put you in the place of what kind of movie it comes from. But it's still kind of I couldn't quite remember all the story beats that led up to why this person was the connection and all that kind of stuff. So I would say they could have added a little bit more explanation as to where some of the characters came from, just to kind of bridge that gap. Okay, let's get into the 5 things I loved, and this is not an exhaustive list because, as I said before, I definitely love this movie a lot. And so the 5 things that I didn't like were definitely nitpicks, and these 5 that I love are not an exhaustive list of things. Number 1, the story. The story is very good. I loved it from the very moment it started. I loved every aspect of it. It still has some connections to some of the other stuff, mostly in the way of characters, not in the way of the actual plot of the movie. But I really love the story. It was very thrilling to kind of figure out how everything happened, and was told very well, so you're kind of on the edge of your seat the whole time. And I love how the story played perfectly into the relationships with all the characters. They just really hit it on all points with the story, and I was very pleased. Number 2, the acting. And the acting in this was superb. Every single character did a great job, as most of them always do, and that's been one of the hallmarks, I think, of the Mission Impossible franchise for a long time now, is that all the acting is just really good. Tom Cruise is great. Simon Pegg is great. Everyone who's in the movie is really great. In particular, I'd like to call out Hayley Atwell as being probably my favorite of the whole movie. I've been a big fan of hers for a long time, being from a big fan of the Marvel Universe. She played Agent Peggy Carter in those movies. And so it was really fun to be able to see her not only get a leading role in a movie that of this size, but to also really get to show a lot of her dynamic range as an actress. I just think that she did a great job, and all the actors did a great job. So the acting is definitely superb, very believable, drew me right in. Number 3, the stakes are high, like really high. And they did a great job of making you feel that. Like, as I said, I think I mentioned this before, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. This was probably the first movie in a very long time where I didn't have an urge to check my phone. I was sucked into the movie from the beginning, from the moment it started. The stakes are very high. There's threats everywhere. You have no idea who is who, like why these people are this and going after that. And they just did a great job of really making you feel like the stakes are high and they matter. And the things that happen in this movie matter. And everything just kind of builds on itself right up until the end. Number 4, incredibly unpredictable and kept me on the edge of my seat. It was definitely unpredictable. Again, the story and the stakes, they just did a great job of, I never quite knew what was going to happen. There's a part in the movie where you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Is that person? No, da, 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 da. And then it finally happens. And I was pretty much unsure mostly up to the point that whatever this particular moment happened. They did a great job of kind of just keeping everything moving in a way that you couldn't quite figure out what was going to happen. Hayley Atwell's character is a kind of a master thief type character, so there's a lot of sleight of hand and misdirection going on throughout the whole movie. Of course, the Mission Impossible kind of hallmark is the masks, so all of a sudden sometimes people are wearing masks and then other people are wearing masks. It just did a great job of keeping everything kind of unpredictable and on your toes. And finally, number 5, the stunts, the cinematography, the VFX, all of those things really came together in a great way. The VFX were superb. The stunts were incredible. The movie put out, a few months ago, we saw that there was a video kind of going over the motorcycle stunt that Tom Cruise did, that he did for real. And in the movie, it looks incredible. That's one of the great hallmarks of Tom Cruise movies. And this was a big thing that was from Top Gun Maverick as well, that everything he does is so authentic because he does it for real. And so on screen, it just looks so good. Everything about it looks good. Even the special effects where it's special effects, they all look great. The cinematography is great. I saw it in the IMAX too, which I would recommend if you can go see it in an IMAX. Definitely worth it. It was a great experience and visually very appealing to watch. That's it for this episode of Film Quest. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked this review of Mission Impossible 7 Dead Reckoning. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We're going to have more videos coming out of other movie reviews, and we will see you next time on Film Quest.